All right, folks. Hello, good evening. Welcome to Rutgers Cooperative Extension, our Earth Day Every Day webinar series. Tonight we have one of our special editions of Earth Day Every Day in the City. I'm realizing I forgot our little stamp. I forgot our little special stamp. I'm Michelle Backus with Rutgers Cooperative Extension, and I'm going to be hosting this evening. Before we jump into the main event, I just want to go through some of our usual housekeeping. For those of you who have been with us before, you know this takes about 4 minutes to get through. I want to let you all know that we are recording this evening's session. I, as well as my colleagues tonight, are all with our speaker also, is with Rutgers Cooperative Extension, which is the outreach arm of Rutgers University. It is a partnership between the counties that we serve and the university. So every county in the state has a Rutgers Cooperative Extension office that you can go and ask your questions, and we help improve the lives of the residents of New Jersey through science-based information. And then the purpose of this webinar, we started this right at the beginning of COVID to help people learn what they can do while they were at home to help protect the environment, because it was the 50th anniversary of Earth Day. So we decided to do this series to help people learn all about actions that they can be taking at home to protect New Jersey's environment. So tonight we're using Zoom. And if you have any questions, you can go ahead and put them in the chat box, which is at the lower right-hand side of your screen. Feel free to ask questions throughout the presentation, and I will relay them to the speaker. Also, we will be doing a poll at the end. We do a poll every time we have one of our Earth Day Every Day sessions. So look out for that poll at the end. Also, I want to let you know that these sessions are free, but we always welcome donations to our program. Any amount is appreciated, and donations can be made to the Rutgers Environmental Stewards Program. And we will go ahead and put the link to that in our in the chat box. And funding helps support our extension volunteer efforts, including internships, scholarships, and supplies. Okay, so if you could go ahead, Liz, and advance the slide. I will talk about the consent part of this. So Rutgers now considers you all research subjects and considers this a research project. And we have to let you know why this study is being done and what it involves. And really all it involves is you participating in tonight's webinar, the poll, and then we will follow up with you in about 6-ish months to find out what actions you have adopted and what you learned as part of this webinar series. Okay, and if you could go to the next slide. Also need to let you know that Rutgers Cooperative Extension is an equal opportunity program provider and employer. If you have any questions about that, if you have any concerns related to discrimination, you can call this phone number here on this slide. This presentation will be made available on our website. The recording will be made available for you to see. Okay, so without further ado, you can go to the next slide, Liz. I am so excited to be able to introduce Liz Pyshnik. Did I say that right?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Who is the project coordinator with Rutgers Cooperative Extension Water Resources Program. And I'm sure Liz is going to tell you all about the Water Resources Program. They do great work in New Jersey. She focused on, in her undergraduate studies, focused on the effects of pollution in the natural environment, modeling the fate of pollution, and exploring remediation solutions. So she is the good person to be talking to you guys tonight all about CSOs, combined sewer outfalls, overflows in New Jersey. So I will go ahead and turn it over to you, Liz.
Thanks, Michelle. Yeah, so the talk is called The History of Combined Sewers in New Jersey. It's sort of the history, how the state of New Jersey and the cities that have combined sewer systems got to the point that they're at right now, and what's being done. So it's a history and a future for these systems and these cities. So yeah. So what is a combined sewer? I'm going to start with that because I don't know if everybody knows what a combined sewer system is. But it's a system that collects sanitary wastewater from houses, buildings, and it also collects stormwater runoff from the streets, and they all go to a wastewater treatment plant. So all of the stormwater runoff and the sanitary waste goes to a wastewater treatment plant through the same pipes. And so this is different than a separated sewer system, which allows stormwater to go through the grates that we commonly see on the streets. So when it rains, the stormwater goes through the storm drains, it goes through pipes, and it goes out back into the nearby streams and waterways where it would have naturally run off to if there had been no man-made structures in the way. So it's a good question to ask, why would these systems be combined in the first place? And so in the late 1800s, early 1900s, when there was more formal development, city planning, there had been open sewers in cities, and that would take, waste from factories, from houses, and send it to either a treatment plant or a nearby waterway where it would just go out and be diluted. And so when those sewers were open and not piped underground, they would obviously collect the stormwater when it rained as well, and send it all away from places where people were living and working. At those times, during those times, way back when, there was less development, so there was less paved surfaces. In fact, paving was really a new thing, which brought about the need for piping underground. Paving, so when it would rain, before there was paved surfaces, even with cobblestones, that was somewhat porous. And so once surfaces started to become paved and, cars were invented, things like that, that's when urban runoff really became something that needed to be managed. And so it made sense to redirect that stormwater into the same pipes that had been built recently underground, which were collecting sanitary waste. And so it was previously seen as a really smart development, really smart, efficient way to engineer cities and to make sure that things stayed clean and that water was moved quickly out of the way. And so this is a really common diagram. This is like the diagram that is really useful when thinking about how these systems are laid out. So you can see on the left during regular, well, you can see the piping system underground. And so on the right, when it's raining, you have runoff, stormwater runoff from rooftops, from the paved surface here, which would be streets, sidewalks. So you have all of this rain, and you also have the sanitary waste, which is present during dry weather as well. And the way that they're set up is there's usually some sort of control structure at the end of these pipes, like a dam or something like that. And that stops the regular dry weather flow from going through the outfall pipe to rivers. So when it rains, these systems fill up, they backfill, and they overflow to nearby streams and waterways. And so the overflow material is raw, untreated sewage. And there's a phrase that's, if you have 1 gallon of sewage and 10 gallons of water and you mix it together, then you have 11 gallons of sewage. So yeah, this, what once was seen as acceptable and a great way to manage the, the growing urban population needs is now detrimental to the cities and the people that live there. It's a public health concern to have raw sewage spilling into waterways. I think that's probably pretty obvious. And it also makes it so that there's unequal water access abilities between different communities. So if it rains in a community where there is separated storm sewers, where, for instance, this would be in a totally different pipe and the storm drains would be totally separated and going right out to the river. Community members who live in towns where there's separated sewer systems, they might not have to worry if they maybe want to go fishing after a rainstorm, or if they want to go swimming after a rainstorm. And so, yeah, it's an issue, and it is being addressed, however late to the party New Jersey is. So, yeah, like I mentioned, when cities were being developed, there was still a lot of pervious surfaces because paving wasn't even really used until, it wasn't widely used until cars became widely used as well. So streets were somewhat able to infiltrate water, and there was a lot more green space. But over time, there has been increased development. And when you have an increase in development, you have an increase in impervious surfaces. And this leads to higher amounts of stormwater runoff. So if you think of the cities in New Jersey now, it's harder to find green space than it is to find impervious surfaces. And so, of course, you're going to have a lot more stormwater runoff, and also we're much more populated than ever as well. So there's an increase in the sanitary sewer use or inputs as well. There's an increase in sanitary sewer contents, inputs, and things like that. So so these systems that were built and developed through the early 1900s and through the mid 1900s, even until, I'm not entirely sure, but I think up through 1950, 1960. So these systems were built for smaller populations. They were also built when there was less impervious surface, and they were also built when there was less intense storms as well. So we know now that because of the effects of climate change, there are more intense storms that occur. So what that means is that you're more likely to have a storm in a shorter period of time that produces more rainfall. So this creates a higher peak flow volume into these sewer systems, and they are not designed to handle the volume of water that is now entering them. Yeah, so this is the urban hydrological cycle. And so this just shows that this is sort of just a diagram showing that when it rains over here, over the city, there's less infiltration, and there's less groundwater recharge as well, which can lead to streams drying up. If you have smaller streams that are tributaries to a larger waterway, sometimes they may appear dry because there is no way for smaller storms to direct or to have the runoff flow into these local streams during smaller storms, since it's all going to a stormwater treatment plant, or sorry, to a wastewater treatment plant. So yeah, I just wanted a visual of that. And so yeah, in New Jersey, you might be wondering, there is 21 stormwater or combined sewer communities, and that through all of them, there's a total of 217 combined sewer overflow points. So an overflow point is the pipe. It's the end of the pipe where it comes out into the waterway. These pipes, just to explain a little bit more, the pipes open up through the amount of pressure of through the volume of water that's behind it. So they usually have like a lid on the end of them, and they will open up when the volume of stormwater behind it in the pipe is so great that it pushes the top open. New Jersey does use floatable nets at the end of most of these pipes, I believe. So there are floatable control structures. So it's like a grate, and it captures the solid material that might be in these overflows. So that could be anything that you might find in sanitary waste, or it might be floatables from stormwater as well, since I'm sure we've all seen that their garbage can collect in storm drains on the street, and eventually it will be washed into the sewer system and out at the end of the pipe, should it get pushed out that way. But there are some grates that are used to hopefully capture those floatables before they enter the waterways. So yeah, I just wanted to show a couple maps of where these communities are. So they're sort of grouped together, not intentionally, obviously, just by way of how these cities and communities developed. But yeah, and so these maps show the highlighted towns and the overflow points that are within these towns, as well as the waterways that the outfalls are flowing into. So for instance, this is the Passaic River, this is the Hackensack, and this is the Hudson. So these are major waterways that many people share and would like to use to recreate on, and they contribute to the quality of life of the residents, really. So I think I personally feel that living next to a body of water is a wonderful thing, and it's definitely really sad to think that these bodies of water wouldn't be able to be used by their local residents because of this type of pollution issue.
Liz, a question?
Yeah.
Can you explain how this may or may not relate to the beach closures in the summer?
Yeah, that is coming up a little bit.
Okay.
Yeah, so I will touch
Done?
on that.
All right. We'll wait for that then.
But that's a good question because it is a very similar issue and can be connected. So yeah, so these are between these two slides, these are all the combined sewer overflow points in New Jersey. Sorry, my I'm a little stuck. Okay, there we go. Okay, so so obviously this is a pollution issue. This is a water quality issue in the state, and it's a public health issue as well. So yeah, so what's being done? Well, the EPA has in the mid 1990s, I think it was 1994, they mandated that all combined sewer overflow points had to be managed so that they will comply with the Clean Water Act, which basically means that the cities or the whatever sewer utility is managing the pipes that are within those systems, that basically they need to eliminate these overflow incidents that happen during heavy storms. So New Jersey actually is a bit late in implementing and addressing plans. I personally am not sure why, but I think that it might be because we have many cities that have these combined sewer overflows, whereas there are many other cities in the nation and definitely across the world that have similar systems. Washington, D.C., Philadelphia, New York City, San Francisco, all have combined sewer systems. And at least within America, all those cities that I have named began addressing their combined sewer overflow issues quite a bit before New Jersey did. But New Jersey has the New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection worked with the EPA to get special permits for the 21 municipalities that have these combined sewers. And so these cities are able to work on a bit of a longer timeline to mitigate their overflows. And so the timeline for these cities right now is they must have their plans developed and implemented by 2050. So these plans are called long-term control plans. And if you do decide to take an interest in maybe your nearby neighboring or city that you live in, then you'll definitely hear the term long-term control plan thrown around a lot. And they're also referred to as LTCPs, just the abbreviation of the term. And okay, so there are two options for cities to show that they will be able to manage the combined sewer overflows. So they can use the presumptive approach or the demonstrative approach. So the presumptive approach assumes that based on the volume of water or based on a number of controls, engineering controls that would be implemented, that by the city implementing those controls, that they will then meet the Clean Water Act regulations. And if they go with the demonstrative approach, then they actually have to show that they are reducing their overflows with monitoring, and so it's a little bit different, but I think all of the towns in New Jersey are going with the presumptive approach. And so what that involves is just having in the long-term control plan, basically the engineers that are coming up with these plans have shown that the designs they're coming up with are going to monitor the volume of water that they expect would cause a CSO, a combined sewer overflow. So I hope that's not too confusing. And so what are those engineering controls? So, oh, and also to note with that, part of what makes combined sewer overflows in violation of the Clean Water Act is that they produce bacterial contamination. And so reducing bacterial contamination is a major goal of these long-term control plans, as well as reducing the volume as well. They sort of go hand in hand, really. So there are two, so mainly the methods that are being used to control the combined sewers are either gray infrastructure or green infrastructure. So gray infrastructure is just referring to things that are made out of concrete or hard surfaces and yeah, basically, steel and concrete. So some different methods of gray infrastructure are designing underground storage tanks to increase capacity for holding during wet weather, using end of pipe treatment systems that are sort of like mini wastewater treatment plants that use disinfectants on overflows before they enter the waterways. Another option is increasing treatment capacity at the wastewater treatment plants. And so that's basically plant expansion. And then sewer separation as well, which involves, tearing up the streets and installing new pipes, possibly installing, or replacing old pipes that were there, which is generally a good idea at this point because water infrastructure in many places is old. And then there's green infrastructure approaches, which are things that are basically using biologically based systems to manage stormwater. So those include things like rain gardens, bioswales, using stormwater planters along streets, using enhanced tree pits to capture stormwater from using street trees, and also using things like cisterns, rain barrels, and different things that can go onto smaller businesses or that homeowners can use to reduce peak flow into the sewer system. So yeah, so there's 21 municipalities that have these combined sewer systems, but there's 565 municipalities in New Jersey. So I think some people say, well, why should I care? Well, because water connects everybody. So the question that was brought up earlier of, how might this impact beach communities? So if you look, there's a large concentration of CSO communities along the Hudson and along the Passaic, which all go out to the Arthur Kill and then the Hudson. And so this can all come out into the Raritan Bay. There is a lot of flushing that happens. The Raritan Bay is beyond my comprehension as far as water systems and how bacteria and garbage might get sort of diluted in that system. But we did see, I believe this last summer, there were some beach closures because of hazardous materials that were washing up on the beaches, and that can come from combined sewer overflows. So I think things are a lot better than they used to be, especially in the Raritan Bay communities, as far as any garbage that might wash ashore. As far as I know, I've been to many places there, and I think those beaches are wonderful. But I do know just from talking to people that back in maybe the 70s or 80s that those beaches were not so nice, or at least that's what I've heard. But yeah, so the beach communities can be, these northern beach communities would be the most impacted from New York City and northern New Jersey combined sewers and combined sewer overflows. But it is possible that things can wash even farther downshore. But this is sort of just connecting general water quality, and beach closures in New Jersey are from after a heavy rainstorm. They're from general fecal bacteria that might run off. That's just out there in our world, really, and that comes from different animals like geese that live very close to waterways that drain to the ocean. That can come from not properly taking care of pet waste, and it can also be due to general pollutants that might run off that might violate state water quality standards for swimming beaches. So the beach closures in New Jersey, as far as I know, are not caused directly by combined sewer overflows, but they are created by a similar problem, really, which is heavy rainstorms causing pollutants to wash into our waterways because we haven't had a chance to treat that water. And definitely follow up if I didn't answer your question. So yeah, so I think there's a question that is, how could you help if you don't live in a CSO community? I want to backtrack to this map really quick too. So, there's Perth Amboy as well, and Perth Amboy is at the end of the Raritan River, and as well in Paterson is along the Passaic River, but there are many more communities along that river before it reaches Paterson. And so a big part of being in compliance with the Clean Water Act is not having high bacterial loads. However, some of these communities have found that even if they were to reduce their own CSOs completely, just because of bacterial contamination that can come from regular runoff in regular separated sewer systems, they still wouldn't meet the water quality standards because of stormwater runoff from upstream communities. So, depending on where you're positioned in your watershed, then you could either be affected by a CSO or also impacting a CSO community. It's a toss-up. But so yeah, so I think that brings up the question: how can you help if you don't live in a CSO community? Well, the first thing I just want to point out is that there is a petition that somebody has created. I do not condone or I don't endorse or not endorse the petition. I'm just saying that if this is something that you feel you are interested in signing, then there's a petition to take some of the COVID relief money that is it's unassigned. It's able to be used on anything, and put it towards some of the repairs needed for sewer systems throughout the state. Oh, that's a good point from Greg Cosentino. Yeah, I do think that's a good point, that it can take those regular pollutants on streets. Yeah, oil and garbage. I guess I would note that I'm not entirely sure, but I don't think that a wastewater treatment plant is fully designed to handle regular street garbage, such as, bags or plastic cups or bottles or things like that. But yeah, I guess that it does work in smaller storms. However, it does reduce the groundwater recharge of the cities that are nearby, and reduces the general flow of streams in those cities. There's also a nonprofit group that is a group of different nonprofits and educational organizations and just residents as well, called Sewage Free Streets and Rivers. And they have a lot of meetings, and you can definitely get involved with that community of people if you're interested in learning more and getting to know people in these communities, and maybe finding out how you might be able to help on an individual basis. Michelle, was there a question?
Yes. So one question is, what have other, so you said New Jersey is behind the curve on this. So what have other states done? Are they all just separating their sewer systems, or are they using?
It's a good question. Yeah, so there's a lot of different things that are being done. I will say, as far as I know, Philadelphia and Washington, D.C. are both heavily relying on green infrastructure. Philadelphia especially has set up a system to fund their upgrades within the city. So they provide, it's a little bit confusing to me. I know that they do some sort of like rebate to get individual homeowners to implement green infrastructure practices in their homes. And then they have a very well organized green infrastructure team, I guess. They monitor their practices very thoroughly, and they monitor them in different weather systems, or under different weather patterns. And they monitor them over time. I believe that they are doing some sewer separation. I think many cities are doing some sewer separation because their systems their pipes need to be replaced anyway. And in general, it kind of makes sense to do that. But I know that, yeah, I think I'm more well versed in the green infrastructure methods that other cities are using. So like New York City has a green infrastructure program where they do, I've seen them implement a lot of stormwater planters, which include trees. So they're using it as a way to manage stormwater, but while also keeping like street trees around and growing, so that a rain garden is usually smaller plants and shrubs. It can definitely include trees too, but traditionally it's shrubs and smaller perennial plants. But yeah, so in New York City, I know there's a lot of stormwater planters. I know, for instance, in Chicago, I believe they have implemented a green alleyways program, which is, that's sort of a unique place-based approach, because I think Chicago has sort of preserved their alleyways, whereas a lot of other cities haven't. So, maybe these are streets that are definitely not big enough for main traffic, but they are, like a one-way or entrance to people's driveways behind their homes. And so they would turn it into porous pavement parking. And so porous pavement, I don't think I mentioned it earlier, but it is another type of green infrastructure. It's a different kind of pavement than the regular tar blacktop that is on the majority of roads. It's a larger rock, and so there's more space between the rocks, and it can actually hold water and infiltrate it into the ground below. So I know that is a tactic in Chicago. Yeah, other states are, I would say it's interesting in New Jersey because our cities are smaller, and so they're, Philadelphia, Chicago, San Francisco, they have sort of much larger populations to fund these upgrades.
Yeah.
Because they are very expensive.
Yeah. It's interesting that these cities have turned to green infrastructure, that they're finding that it's cheaper to reduce the volume of water
Right.
going to these systems and install these green infrastructure practices rather than doing these major separations.
Yeah, that's a good point. So the green infrastructure approach is generally it's less expensive. And so it's less expensive too because it works during smaller storms, and those are the majority of storms that need to be managed. So for instance, Ida, that was 100-year storm. It is a large storm that would be difficult for anyone to plan for. It's just not how systems are planned, really. So the advantage with green infrastructure is that you improve the local ecology, you increase green space, which is generally better for human health. It also increases when you increase green space, you improve air quality, and it also, by filtering water through these biological systems, you improve the water quality as well. And yeah, it doesn't involve tearing up, whole streets and intersections and building underground structures that then have to be managed for decades and decades. And yeah, it's above you, it's above ground. It's you can look at it and monitor it pretty easily compared to underground engineered systems.
Okay, there are other questions, but I'll let you get on with the presentation and we'll get back to them.
Okay, yeah, I'll come back to that one. And then yeah, so I guess just being an advocate for improved water quality in your community, basically just putting pieces together for people. Once you start speaking about these things, you can help other people understand that all of our water systems are connected, really. And if you work on improving your local water quality, then if you're upstream of a combined sewer community, you can, help to reduce the bacterial loads that they are going to have to deal with then downstream as well. And that's really the same everywhere, not just being upstream from a combined sewer community, that's really just generally a good practice to take care of your local waterways. So to advocate for improved water quality, you can become a green infrastructure champion, which is something that the Water Resources Program offers. It's a certificate program, and it's in the beginning of every year. And I can put a link in the chat to that at the end of my presentation. And so, by becoming something like a green infrastructure champion, then you really start to see the world as, like, where can I put a rain garden? Where can I put a cistern? How can I manage my, the runoff from my own driveway? Am I making sure that, if I want to wash my car, like, should I do it in my driveway or should I go to the local car wash? Well, you should go to the local car wash because they actually have, they send that water to a treatment plant so that it can be properly treated and it doesn't just run off with all those chemicals into your local waterway. Of course, if you were to become involved in a group like Sewage Free Streets and Rivers, you can start to connect with people in combined sewer communities, and and you could work with them to see how you might be able to help advocate for what they're looking for in their solutions. So I'm going to touch on a little bit more about the long-term control plan solution options in a minute. Let's see, I'm going to answer the federal government. Does it make funding available? So I know that there are programs that municipalities can apply to. I'm forgetting the name right now, but I think it's like, I was just reading about it the other day, but there is an EPA fund that is it's like 80% grant, 20% loan for municipalities to improve their water quality. And I believe in the description that it said that combined sewers are definitely a valid use of this funding and these grants. I think if anybody's interested in that actual grant, I can definitely go pull up the link and find it. So I'm not sure if the EPA has like a section of funding that is specifically for meeting Clean Water Act goals, but they do offer lots of funding to improve water quality and to implement programs that improve water quality. And then let's see. So Kelly in Union County cut down a lot of mature trees. Right, yeah, so I've actually heard this from multiple places. I just heard about this similar thing happening down in Atlantic County in a coastal town where this resident was concerned because there's not many old trees there. And yeah, no, I fully agree. It's really tough to get people to see the connection between plants and landscape management and public health. I think it's an area that a lot of education is needed, and I would say, if possible, definitely go reach out to the people in your town about this decision that was made, and see if you can influence any of their upcoming plans to cut down any more trees, or suggest that, if there's increased paving going on, that maybe you use some green infrastructure to mitigate those newly paved projects or those new projects that are creating more impervious surface. And yeah, I mean, definitely feel free to reach out to the Water Resources Program or to your county agent too, to know, to find out more about what options you might have to, to what resources you might have, so that if you do go talk to people in your town, you can, come knowing what resources are out there for you to do these projects that you're proposing. Okay, so one way to fund these upgrades that need to happen, because yes, all of these 21 municipalities that have the burden of upgrading their sewer systems now, about somewhere between 50 or 60 to 100 years after they were built, now all these new residents have to deal with it, and they're expensive. These plans are really expensive. I think on the low end, they're $100 million, and on the upper end, they're $300 million. So yeah, these are huge projects, and the impacts of this will be felt by the residents in those cities mainly, because the main tactics that are going to be used to raise the funds are increased service costs for water usage, and yeah, so one option is to use a stormwater fee, and I believe right now in New Jersey, I don't believe any towns have actually implemented it, but again, that doesn't mean that it's unusual. There are hundreds of towns across the country that implement stormwater fees that even don't have combined sewers. It's simply a way to fund infrastructure management projects and infrastructure upgrades. So it's called a fee because it's dedicated to stormwater. And so the fee is not the same as a tax. So, the stormwater fee is not a rain tax, as you may have heard, and the money raised from it would only go to projects that would upgrade stormwater systems, and the way that it would work as well, or the way that it could work, because it can be changed by the municipality depending on what they need, but it can be based on the amount of impervious cover on a specific property. So that if there is an Amazon warehouse in your town, then you won't be paying the same amount you won't be paying the same amount as a homeowner as a Amazon warehouse. So it would be something that should be or could be beneficial to homeowners if larger properties and businesses were to pay more, since technically they contribute more impervious surface, which causes more stormwater runoff into the sewer systems. And then, so there is some towns are doing feasibility studies to see what implementing a stormwater fee would be like. I know there is support for doing a feasibility study as well. And so yeah, the New Jersey DEP has some guidance documents on how to do the feasibility study. And that might be something that maybe if you're interested in stormwater management within your own municipality, you might want to reach out to your local leaders or work with them on implementing a stormwater fee. And yeah, so coming back to promoting green infrastructure. So again, like we mentioned before, the practice of using green infrastructure is generally a more affordable alternative. for managing regular size storms, such as so the water quality storm in New Jersey is 1 and I believe it's 1.5 inches of rain in 24 hours. Definitely correct me if I'm wrong, Michelle. But so that is a smaller storm. That's a more typical rainstorm, and green infrastructure can manage that generally very well. That's a reasonable amount of water to manage. You can recharge the groundwater, and you can, by using green infrastructure, you can reduce pollutants entering the waterways and yeah, improve local ecology and improve air quality as well. So yeah, promoting green infrastructure in your own town can help communities that are downstream because, like I mentioned before, some of these combined sewer communities have found that they, even if they were to remove all of their combined sewers, they would still, their waters would still not be usable because of the amount of bacterial contamination coming from all the upstream communities. So I think it's a way of showing, you know, if every town were to implement more green infrastructure, it would just be better for everybody's water quality. Yeah, so, you know, becoming an advocate is a really great way to just educate people, basically talking about this stuff. I think most people in New Jersey, I don't know about most people, but many people that I know don't know that, or didn't realize that there are still lots of towns that deal with raw sewage overflows. And also, just to note, the raw sewage doesn't just overflow at the end of pipes. Sometimes it overflows in the middle of a street through a manhole, or it can back up into someone's basement as well. And so, you know, that's when it really becomes a public health concern, because then you might have people literally wading through raw sewage, which is like just horrific. And so, yeah, and there's another way, if you would like to advocate for local waterway health, you can start an initiative in your town to get people to adopt a drain or adopt a catch basin where people volunteer to go out and clean the garbage, or sometimes there's leaf litter or grass clippings that can get caught in catch basins, and then that washes out into waterways, and all of that is pollutants. And so when you have people who are willing and want to help go out and collect the garbage from their drains before a storm, or even just, you know, just in general, it can be really helpful, and you know, just get people sort of talking and thinking about the health of their local waterways.
Liz, I just want to let our audience know I have opened up the poll. If you want to go ahead, and while Liz is finishing up the talk, you can go ahead and answer those questions.
And yeah, so one final thing. Sometimes my PowerPoint seems to lag. Hold on. Okay, so yeah, another point I wanted to bring up is that, you know, I think Passaic Valley Sewerage Commission service area is a good example, but all of these combined sewer communities are, you know, connected to other separate sewer communities through the treatment plants. So during a large, you know, a big rain event, it can be helpful for people in surrounding municipalities just to be aware of how, however small it might seem, you know, how their actions might still have an impact. So, if everybody in all of these towns here in this map were to, if there was a rainstorm and everybody wanted to stay home and do their laundry, then, that might end up causing the treatment plant to reach capacity and not be able to handle the treatment of all the stormwater that's coming in addition to the sanitary waste. So, it's just some little things like that, like, not if you are connected to combined sewer communities through your treatment plants, then, maybe if it's raining, try not to use or do too many things that are high water use activities at home. And so I don't know. It's just like little things like that that can help. And by talking about it with people in your neighborhood who might not understand these systems, or maybe don't understand why they're there, because it's really a long history of basically something that was really good at first, and then we left it because it worked, and now it doesn't, and we have to fix it for the health of our waterways, and so that people can use these waterways for recreation. And yeah, I think that's it, actually.
That's it. That's the last slide.
Yeah, that's it.
Okay. Okay, great. Thank you.
Mhm.
Liz, a question.
Mhm.
What is the timeline for the long-term control plans?
Oh, yeah. So the long-term control plans, well, right now, all of the municipalities have submitted their long-term control plans. So they spent the last 5 years coming up with these plans in an iterative process with community members, with engineers, and with the town municipality people, so that they could come up with the most appropriate plan and methods for reducing the combined sewer overflows. So, some towns are choosing to use end of pipe treatment. Some towns are using underground storage tanks. I do think that the PVSC, Passaic Valley Sewerage Commission service area, they're going to massively expand their treatment capacity, and also the force main pipe, which is the red line here. So they're going to expand the capacity of that. And then there's definitely different plans for Camden and Gloucester City as well. And so the timeline now, the New Jersey DEP is going to reissue new permits that are going to be based on these new plans. And then they have to have the outfalls controlled by 2050, controlled to a point where they are.
Okay.
Yeah. And so every 5 years, actually, the New Jersey DEP is going to be issuing a new permit for all these towns, because they have to sort of reassess where they're at in the plan and what they're going to do next. And then the DEP has to approve it.
Okay. And are towns on track for like how are towns doing with this? Like, are most towns?
Well, I saw that somebody was on here from Bayonne, so I definitely welcome any input, because I don't live in a combined sewer community, but I do work in Perth Amboy and Patterson. But as far as I know right now, I do think things might be considered a little behind schedule, because this whole year, so all the towns submitted at the beginning of the year, and right now I think all the towns are still waiting to get their permits for next year. I don't know if that's really behind schedule. I know that they're huge plans, so it takes a long time to read everything and approve everything. But yeah, I just want to bring up too, I apologize, I didn't put it in the presentation, but there are big issues that people in these communities have with the plans and the way that they're being developed, because they feel that they're not including community members enough in the development of the plans, and that it's something that big engineering companies are just coming up with the plans. So there have been public meetings, and there has been strong voices, but they could always use more advocacy from for the community voices to be heard. So if people had interest in reaching out to, if they have family members that live in these towns,
Okay.
just working with them. Yeah.
Another question, how familiar are you with the anaerobic digestion systems? Are there any in use for processing the sludge from wastewater treatment plants? Do you know if PVSC uses them?
I believe that they do use anaerobic digestion, and I think that is some like a regular form of wastewater treatment, or a regular step in the process. I know all wastewater treatment plants are a little different, but I think that anaerobic digestion is one part of the process. But I also think, for example, I think that Middlesex County Utilities Authority is potentially going to upgrade their system by adding a new digester as well. I'm not sure, definitely. I don't work for these companies or represent them, so I can't say with authority, but
I saw Amy
Hey.
pop up, so maybe she has
Hey,
something
Liz.
to add to that.
yeah, definitely.
I just wanted to say that Passaic Valley for sure uses anaerobic digesters.
Okay.
I believe it's the secondary or tertiary treatment of the treatment train that occurs. So basically, the first thing that happens, everything gets filtered, then everything ends up in one of their settling tanks, and then I believe you go to the anaerobic digester.
Yes, this is ringing a bell now. That really jogged my memory for a second. I was like, I'm pretty sure that these treatment plants use anaerobic digestion. Yeah, it's tough. I don't really work, and I don't think about them a lot and their specific processes, but
yeah,
I was trying to remember.
We usually take a tour of Passaic Valley every year, but it's been a couple years with COVID. But
Right.
we take the environmental stewards there, so I feel like I could practically give that tour at this point. I've seen it so many times. But yeah, let me know. I'll see. They're not giving the tours right now, but yeah, I'll invite you next time.
Yeah. Yeah, there's also, let me see if I can find a link, because I think PVSC actually has a whole room that anyone can go in, which, like, I don't know if people want to see it, but there is it's like an online presentation forum where they presented all the different long-term control plans for all the different cities in their service area.
While you're doing that, go ahead and work on bringing that up, but I am going to close out the webinar because we are at 7:39.
Oh, right.
But feel free to bring that up, and we can show that to the folks who are still online with us. Folks, thank you so much for being with us this evening, and I do want to thank Liz for this presentation. Please come back next week on Monday, where we continue our Earth Day Every Day in the City series. Next week is going to be urban wildlife. with Kathleen Kerwin, who's also with Rutgers Cooperative Extension. So you can still register for that if you want to on our Earth Day Everyday website. And feel free to spread the word about that. And thank you so much for another great week of Earth Day Every Day.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks to everybody. And unfortunately, I just found out it was part of a virtual meeting, so they closed the room. I'm sorry.